I didn't know.
Yeah, yes, it was a bit fast.
Steve Warner.
I'm here.
Ron Sanko.
Here.
Bill Jenks.
Here.
Dave Reeser.
Here.
And Keith Darrell will be absent.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
No, thank you.
Moving on to pension administration.
I had emailed you earlier in the month that we received our state aid. It was $40,000 more than anticipated. So this time we have a few options. The first two options address how it is we distribute the state aid to the pension plans. That receipt came in on September 25th, so we have till October 25th to remit the funds in full to the pension plans. We have option number one.
Do we have any choice not to submit it to the pension fund?
No, no.
And this was state aid, that money came in?
Yes.
It's not our money.
$522,000 was received. We
Okay.
must remit $522,000 by October 25th.
Okay.
Under option one, the bare minimum that we could contribute would be $14,000 after state aid. And that would apply an excess funding in the fire fund to the other funds. That has not been the borough's practice to do so. We contribute the state aid, or we have in all prior years contributed state aid in correlation to the units that were certified and the unit value assigned to those units. So our first decision is how to remit the $522,000 to the pension plans. To do it so that there is a minimum amount that's due, or to do it in correlation to the units that were certified.
All right, so I want to draw this picture in my mind. We got money from the state. It was $40,800. We have to.
We received $522,000 from the state. We must remit to the pension plans $522,000.
I'm talking about the additional state aid that we got.
It's 40 more than we had anticipated based on the unit value that we estimated from last year's receipt.
So so that's money that fell out of the sky from the state for us.
Yes.
Okay, in order to do that, we have to pay some of our own money? Or can we just submit the $40,800?
We need to submit the entire $522,000 to the pension plans, but that does not fulfill our MMO for 2024. There will be additional funds due to fully meet our obligation.
Minimum of 14,777.
Yes.
We could contribute more, but that's the minimum.
All right. So the first choice.
So we don't have a choice. We have to submit 14,777.67.
We have a choice of whether it be 40,000, so we can do the 40.
No, we have to use the 40,000.
The 40,000 is money that's in and out. That's a transactional event, right? We deposit it, we send it out.
Yes.
Okay.
The 14,777 is the balance left of the fourth quarter MMO.
All right.
Okay, so we certified a certain number of units and anticipated a certain amount of aid. That amount is compared to the MMO, and there is a gap that is left over.
So we
That
have
gap
to submit 14,777 is what you're telling me.
at a minimum, in addition to the 522.
But the 522 has already been paid in for the most part.
I haven't done it yet because I need approval as to which fund to pay it into.
Is it reserved?
No.
No.
That's state aid, so like
It's sitting in the general fund now. It was a September receipt, it will be an October distribution.
So the whole state aid is 522.
Yes, and that must be remitted in full by October 25th.
Okay, so we
And I
obviously-
can do it according to the units that were certified, or I can take the excess fire funds that was received and I could apply them to the other funds. That has not been our past practice. It's bad optics to take units that were certified for firefighters and pay the police obligation with.
I would.
But it is an option, but it's not an attractive option.
Yeah, I would recommend that we follow the past practice. I think the expectations of our bargaining units is that we will allocate according to the credits that we've received from the state.
So that's the first motion that's needed, to direct me how to remit the 522 to the state, because I must do it by plan. I must do it to the police plan, the non-uniform plan, and the fire plan. So that's the first motion that's needed.
Let's stay with past practice. I'll make that motion.
So,
So that means we have to put in 55,000
No.
as practice,
Well,
option 3.
Yeah,
We have to
option
do
three,
one.
that's option three, isn't
Can
it?
we talk about option 2 and 3?
Option 1, 2, and 3 addresses what we're going to pay to fulfill our MMO, and that is for the fourth quarter MMO. But before we pay the fourth quarter MMO, we must remit the $522,000 that was received in state aid.
okay, so we're talking about the yellow side.
Yes, that must
be done.
that must be done by
Okay,
October
so we have a
25th.
motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's for that part.
The second piece is how much more to pay to meet our MMO. Option 1, which we just discussed as not being attractive, would mean we would only have to pay for the fourth quarter $14,000. Option 2 says don't pay anything additional to the firefighters and meet the police and the non-uniform obligation. That would require a fourth quarter MMO of $23,000. What we have done in the past for several recent years has been to pay the entire state aid and pay the planned fourth quarter MMO of $55,000.
And how much is that taking us over budget from our?
100,000. And the reason being, in addition to the 55,000, there's a variance on the defined contribution component of the plan as well. Those numbers are estimates based on the 2023 payroll. That's the state formula. So based on the 2023 estimated payroll, with each and every payroll, we pay 10% into each plan, into the non-uniform and into the firefighters plan. That estimate that was approved and became part of our budget does not account for rate changes for 2024, nor additional personnel. So for each additional firefighter, for example, that was hired, that was not payroll that was estimated when we approved the 2024 using the 2023 payroll defined contribution. So we will go over budget by making the additional fourth quarter, as well as going over budget because of the defined contribution payroll estimate. Together, they are over budget by $100,000.
But we're not legally required.
We are not
make
legally
that payment.
required. Our legal requirement is only $14,000. Past practice, so that we don't short side any particular bargaining unit, would be $23,000.
What
Our
are the
past
repercussions
practice, pardon?
What are the repercussions of option 2? Like putting into police, non-union, not fire though?
The repercussions is that we have another evaluation coming up at 1/1/25. Any additional pension contribution we make sets us up for a stronger asset position on January 1st of 25. That valuation will be used to determine the 2026 MMO. So
Agreed.
anything additional we
That
put
being
in,
said, though, we are being held hostage to an exorbitant number next year.
yes, there's nothing we can do about that.
Right, there's nothing we can do about that. If they would have taken that picture a month earlier or a month later, our $700,000 increase in the budget wouldn't be anywhere close to $700,000. I just think with next year, the amount of money that we're gonna put in, I get you're saying we're gonna take a picture, but if we took the picture today versus taking the picture when they did take the picture of it, I don't know that we need to fund more than we should in anything else at this point. I get our past practice. I just think that the market is recovered to the point that I don't know that we need to just continue on, because I think we're gonna be overfunding it next year.
And that could hurt us in the long run.
I don't wanna make that a scare tactic. I mean, we talked about that before. If we overfund it too much, then we're gonna get non-state aid. I don't think that's true, but I do think that we're staring at a situation where we're gonna be paying in our minimum next year, which is an additional $700,000 next year,
Compared to the current year,
compared to
yes,
the current year.
yes.
So we already have a budget hole of $700,000 created because a picture was taken on one bad day, or one bad week, really. The following month, if the picture was
23,
taken,
correct.
that number would have been, I think they said $500,000 or something like that. And 2 months later, it would have been $250,000 more, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we're gonna be overfunding it next year. I understand that the picture, so can we get an idea of if they took a picture, can the Gerard guys or gals take a picture of, if it was taken the picture of at the end of September, where we would stand? So we have an idea what to do here.
I can ask them to do that, and we can hold off the decision regarding the fourth quarter MMO. That would only be done by the end of the calendar year. So we do have a window of time.
Okay, so we had to do the
Between
the $40,000 today,
522.
$522, but that was all budget numbers except for
The 40 was a windfall.
the 40 was a windfall.
Yes,
I recommend that we try to get Gerard to give us an idea of what that picture is gonna look like as of the end of September.
okay,
And if we find out that, hey, we do need to put the whole $55,000 in, then we'll go ahead and do so. But
Okay.
I don't wanna just arbitrarily throw that $55,000 in there.
So
We're obviously gonna have to do 14,777, right?
That's a minimum.
that,
You're taking from
you're
fire.
taking from the fire company
Yeah,
to meet
not
the
just two.
police and the
Okay.
non-union.
All right,
But,
that's fair.
but,
So we'd have to do 23,000,
Correct.
right, so since you
or
know-
not, or nothing, we can't do nothing, though, right?
No,
we do not.
if we don't make an additional contribution, we will
Alright.
not meet our obligation.
I would like Gerard, and this is just my opinion, I'm only one person on the committee, but I would like to find out what the valuation looks like as of the end of September. I know the market it happened 2 years ago, the market took a crap the last month, and I get all that, but I just think we're in a spot where the market has recovered by a lot.
Very nice.
And when we know we're gonna be putting in $700,000 more next year than we did this year, in my mind, we're gonna be overfunding it. I could be wrong, and that's the only way we can find out is asking Gerard.
But since you know that option 2 is the minimum, couldn't you also recommend the council approve option 2 and then recommend an additional amount the following month if you get the numbers you expect? Or if you don't get the numbers you
Well,
expect?
we have to have action on the distribution of the state aid today.
That motion has
We
to
But
be.
did
that, we had
Yeah,
it,
we did, yeah, we
that's
did
done.
that.
It's a matter of do we do 23 or 55?
But
And
we,
that can be held off until.
And that can be done any time before the end of the calendar
I-
year.
That would make sense then to hold
We
it
know-
up and let's get a
Let's
better
just get a better picture of it. I mean, does it, I get your point. We're gonna do it either way.
we're gonna do at least 2.
We're gonna at least do
So
something
if you
like
do it
but-
now, then you don't have to worry about overlooking
But
it
we
or
have
something in
plenty
the
of time, we
future.
have budget meetings we could do it at, we got enough meetings coming up in the next 2 months that we'll be able to figure that out.
Okay, so we'll revisit the fourth quarter MMO option.
Yes. So I'll make a recommendation, we table it for now.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. I'm not trying to avoid our obligation, it's the last thing I'm trying to do, but I just wanna get an idea of, because of that one day in time picture, how much is that gonna skew it for next year when we know we're gonna be radically overfunding it?
So that has to be back on the agenda for next month.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Long-term financing options, more good news, I'm sure.
Actually, yes. Unless you're feeling that's not fun.
Better not get it done.
All right, well, first of all,
we apologize we could not get to this to you yesterday. I printed this out at 10:30 last night, so we received proposals yesterday for the bank. What's that?
Do you have an actual mention?
I do, yeah. So we received proposals yesterday for the bank loan request for proposal. As part of that process, as we talked about, we went out to 16 select local and regional banks across Pennsylvania and also into Rhode Island, we'll point out in a second. Those banks reviewed the financials, reviewed the term sheet, describe that in a second, and provided those proposals yesterday. Our team put together the summaries we're going to talk about and then provided the evaluation of the comparison between the bond issue and the bank loan. What's important here is, as you remember, we asked them to do two different alternatives, one for a 20-year amortization and one for a 15-year amortization at the $5 million borrowing amount. So that should give us all the information necessary to give you an idea of what the budgeted payment will look like if you decide to move forward with one option versus the other. So that's going to be the discussion for today is which term, what method of financing, and potentially which bank or a bond issue. Okay. Garrett's going to run through what.
Sure. So I'm on page 2, the first summary page. This summary page is specific to the proposals we got for the 15-year financing. There's a lot of text on this page. Frankly, what we'll get to, the punchline is as far as the 15-year proposal or 20-year proposal, as we see it, Webster Bank provided the best overall proposal. So just walking through a couple of these, top Webster Bank, they propose a fixed rate for the full term of the loan, so for the full 15 years, and that rate is a 3.899%. Because it's for the full term of the loan, there is no reset rate, there's no cap rate, there is no floor rate. As part of the financing, they would charge the borough a fee of $3,500. Now again, that fee would be baked into the financing, so it wouldn't be any fee out of pocket of the borough, but it's their, frankly, it's their internal counsel's time to review all the borrowing documents and things of that nature. They did offer, so we put into the RFP when we sent it out to the banks, that the borough was the recipient of $2.1 million of RACP funds. So we requested from all the banks, frankly, that to the extent the loan is not prepayable at any time without penalty, please allow us kind of a one-time prepayment feature at any point for the $2.1 million of RACP funds, so that we're not having to sit on the funds and hold the funds kind of in the borough's coffers until we reach the call date, and then we can pay off the bonds. So we did ask for that. Webster obliged us and said that yes, we will provide you a one-time prepayment feature where once you get the RACP funds in, you can immediately prepay the loan to the tune of up to $2.1 million. After that initial prepayment, similar to a bond issue, they do have a prepayment lockout period for about 4 years, and I'm in that prepayment feature column. So the loan would be non-callable on or through May 31st of 2029. After that, you can see there's kind of a tiered prepayment provision whereby if you want to prepay the loan prior to May 31st of 2031, you're basically prepaying the loan at 102% of the principal that's outstanding. If you wait a couple years, so if you prepay it in between 2031 and 2033, prepayable at 101%. And if you wait until after May 31st, 2033 to prepay the loan, it's prepayable at par. So you're just prepaying the principal that's outstanding. That's, again, Webster Bank. So pretty straightforward in the sense, prepayable, or fixed rate for the full duration of the loan, 3.9%. While we typically like fixed rate proposals because it provides you the budgetary certainty, some banks simply aren't able to provide a loan for the full duration of the financing. So just for comparative purposes, if you look at the Mid-Penn Bank proposal beneath it, they were only able to offer fixed rate for the first 5 years at a 5.9%. After that initial fixed rate period of 5 years, the rate would reset at 81% of the Wall Street Journal prime rate at that time. Subject to a cap rate, and I know it says $0. The cap rate for the mid-Penn proposal is actually 6.5%. So even though there's a reset rate, it could be capped at 6.5%. They charge a fee of $6,500, but their loan is prepayable anytime without penalty. The only reason I walked through that one is not necessarily because we're advocating it, but at least it helps you look and read the rest of the page as far as how the page is structured. Any questions on this page on the 15-year financing options before I show you the 20-year?
Who is Webster Bank?
Webster Bank is a bank out of Rhode Island, is where they're headquartered. Frankly, I would say over the past, probably going back to 2019, 2018, they've frankly been arguably the most active bank loan provider in the Pennsylvania market, at least for bank loans that we've participated in.
I brought them into Pennsylvania, is the bottom line. We had a connection to our office in Providence, Rhode Island. They reached out and said, this bank's been very active with our local governments. We know you do a lot of bank loans, you should talk to them. They have a very strong public finance group that handles this. They actually merged with a bank called Sterling a couple of years back, but they're one full Webster bank. They provide a significant amount of funding nationally, but they really focus on the local government space, and they're good to work with. And they don't require deposit relationships. They're simply a public funding source bank that uses this as a way to provide liquidity and return for their investors.
And we've done, frankly, again, over the last several years, a number of financings with them. So they're not new. They might be new to you all, the name. They're not new to us. We do a lot of work with them. They're always very easy and good to work with. They don't try and sneak in weird or overly onerous provisions in their loan documents or anything like that. They're pretty straight shooters.
One important point here is they have an office in Pennsylvania, because that is actually one of the
Requirements
for Pennsylvania debt issuance. You need to have an
200
office in
square feet somewhere
Pennsylvania.
in Wilkes-Barre or something?
It's actually in Conshohocken.
Yep.
Yeah, they actually,
In their office, right?
the office is, no, the office is in Conshohocken that handles like mortgages and things like that, but that's all that's required in Pennsylvania. What will happen is in real life, should you move forward with a proposal from them, the invoicing would come normally and you write your checks or wire money to them, and that's all that's necessary, so.
We
You
guess they'll move their offices to Wyomissing.
There's maybe a space across the street, I don't know. I mean, they've done a fair amount of work in Pennsylvania. Again, obviously I'm not a banker at all. There's value in different reasons why they provide funding, and this is just a source of, they feel is a good market, and they've always been pretty strong.
And the other question I have is with the prepayment features, I thought we were obligated to keep the loan for a certain period of time
Yes.
by the state,
By
right?
DC, do you mean the,
No,
The grant.
we do 10 years. We have to refinance it into at least a 10-year time period, but we can, once we do that, we can pay it off before
Yeah.
10 years.
Which that's what this is doing. So you have an interim financing, and that is holding up the RACP funds until you refinance that until you refinance that interim loan into a permanent long-term financing, which is this.
that satisfies them once we get through this process. After that, it's up to you and how you want to manage your debt going forward.
In case people are interested, the Wall Street Journal prime today is 8%.
Right.
So it's not what we think of as the Fed or those other numbers.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, funny story, the first loan I ever did with Webster was with a little borough of New Salem. They have 300 people live in their municipality. So they do that, and they've done financings up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area, $25 million.
I think they've even done financings for Penn State University, frankly, for $100 million. Different group, but they're active.
Yeah, I as much as I like banks and it all works out, from your perspective, the way I think of this, it's who's giving you the best transaction? Does it make sense? There's going to be an administrative side with any debt issuance that you do. So the question for staff will always be, how do I handle the billings? If there's a problem, how does that work? There's different reasons for bonds versus bank loans, but we can talk a little bit about that nuance. But in the grand scheme of things, what we care about here right now is flexibility, interest rate, payment and ease, and that's some of the decision points we'll make shortly.
Jumping to the following page, again, much less text on this page. 4 banks were willing to lend under the 20-year financing amortization. You can see them listed. Again, Webster Bank is, in our opinion, the strongest proposal. Their rate under the 20-year financing is 4.095, so about 20 basis points more than the 15-year financing option. All of their other conditions are the same, so the same bank fee, the same prepayment feature, and again, allowing for that one-time prepayment of up to $2.1 million for the RACU funds.
So we couldn't refinance this if we wanted to under Webster until after 2033, without penalty.
Without penalty. So in theory, I mean, rates could go so low that you could still refinance it, pay the penalty, and it might still make economic sense. But your statement is correct, without penalty.
Yeah, let's just think about the math real fast, it's not that hard. But if you guys have a $5 million issuance, you get the $2.1 million, you prepay it, you have a $3 million balance, you pay some principal over the next few years, and, you know, mathematically, you
So
just.
maybe you're left then with a $2.5 or $2 million loan at a 5-year mark.
Yep, and now you have, you know, it's $50,000 that's kind of costing you. You refinance, pay cost of issuance. You need rates to be, you know, 2%-ish to really even think about it. You may have better use of your money at that time. So you can do it. It's just a question of math, like everything else.
And again, I think from our perspective, and you know, the administration can chime in, but we typically see that municipalities like the certainty from a budgeting perspective of a fixed rate for the full term. And again, we're not, our crystal ball doesn't exist, it's been broken, it's in the closet, whatever you want to call it, but you're trying to predict what interest rates might be in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years to see if you'd be better off with the fixed variable portion is not something we typically like to advise, but again, they're options to you nonetheless.
It's hard to argue locking in a higher rate for a shorter period of time to have all the flexibility in the world. I think this is the concept I look at if I'm on the bank loan side, because you have that extraordinary option of redemption for the $2.1 million, which is exactly what you wanted for flexibility purposes. You want to pay this down once you get the grant.
And just to be clear, when it says conditions for the other 2.1, everybody else is NA.
The others either didn't have a prepayment provision at all, so it doesn't matter. So if you get 2.1, you can write a check either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're sure that we're gonna get June 1st of 2026. That's a year and a half away. We should get that.
We've closed out the construction closeout meeting with our grant analyst November 6th. So really financing of the
This is the
short-term
last
bridge loan,
checkbox.
yeah, this is the last checkbox.
Okay.
For what it's worth, this is not yet guaranteed, but I've actually been told reimbursement's looking closer to 2.7 million.
I like that better.
Okay, so you have a problem.
Yeah.
You're going to get 2.1.
You're gonna get 2.7.
But I'm sorry, you get 2.7. You have a
Like pay
2.1 max.
2.1.
You can keep the 600,000 and put it on a penalty. We can have a conversation about that.
Put in an obligate fee.
No, we'll put it in a obligate account for 3 years and then
You'll be better off.
never touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that agreeable?
Absolutely.
I mean, again, that's
listen,
not,
Listen, I think, and I can't vote on this, but I think, obviously, I don't know anything about Webster Bank. That's the only thing that freaks me out. I know a lot about a lot of banks.
Mhm.
I don't know a lot about that one. In fact, I didn't know it existed until about 10 minutes ago.
If it's helpful, we can certainly provide you at least with a list of financings we've done with them.
I think that would be,
And
I
then,
think that would be agreeable.
and then you can always, to the extent you want to, always maybe reach out to the,
I assume
The municipality
financials are
or what
pretty
have you.
secure. I don't know if
They're a strong bank.
yeah.
they're strong bank.
Yeah, and I don't want to say this out loud. Actually, I will say it out loud. If you do a financing with a bank, right, the loan closes and the bank ends up selling to someone else, that loan goes to the new bank. You're just
Yeah,
paying a
I
different
understand.
person. I know you know that. So,
So 3.9%
or 4.1,
or 4.1, 4.1 of those I think is a pretty
very
fair
attractive.
interest rate.
Good rate.
And I should also note, that rate is solid until settlement. So if you approve you know, the loan when we get to the timeline in the next couple of weeks, you know, that rate is locked in until settlement. So for example, if, you know, the world goes to hell in a handbasket next week, you know, this rate is, or next month, you know, this rate is a solid rate until settlement.
Let's just talk about the bonds.
Sure.
You know, I think we are very much still believe the bonds is a good option too, by the way.
Right.
We knew from our experience that going this route between a 15 and 20-year option, we knew the type of banks that would submit, and we were hopeful that Webster was going to be one of them, knowing their previous ability to provide fixed rates during that period of time. We also knew that once you go to 20 years as an option, several banks would say, we just don't do 20-year amortization. So none of these things surprised us. You know, the spread between the best bank and the worst bank is also not that surprising, because we've seen some really wide spreads, because it's just the way the market is these days. So good news is it only takes one to have a good option, and we do. So, yep. So let's just talk about the 20-year first. Again, these are really philosophical questions, so we're on page 4. As you've seen, this is very similar to the look of the summaries that we'll have. For future meetings, we'll have something similar to this, just narrowed down a little bit, and then we'll provide, you know, amortization schedules and sources and uses of funds and things like that are all the backup information. But this, again, gives you a very good snapshot of what it could look like. So let's just start with the yellow first, which is Webster Bank, and we're starting with the 20-year option, because that's the longer term. Assuming that fixed rate of about 4.1%, all the same terms and conditions, you know, re-amortizing a little bit. We'd have to adjust a couple of things once it's all said and done. We can do that a little bit later. The balance would be about $370,000 per year in an annual debt service payment, which equates to about $7.4 million in total principal and interest. I will stop, take a look at that. Look at the blue section. So important here is there are uncertainties, right? I did not go and borrow and do a competitive bond sale to get interest rates yet. We're using current market conditions for a AA2 credit rated issuer. We have not gone through the credit rating process. Do I feel that you will be a strongly, highly rated issuer? Yes. Could you be higher than AA2? I think that's also entirely possible. We wanted to be somewhat conservative in our evaluation for this process, but understand that between now and when we lock in bond rates, rates could change, go up, go down, obviously.
And realistically, we're a month away from locking in a bond rate.
Yep, at this point in time.
If you were to say go, today.
Yep. So for kind of exact today's dollars, based on a AA credit, your payments would be lower with a bond issue. That is nothing different than what we said a month ago. Those payments would be about $365,000-ish per year. The difference being on a few sides. One, you would have to work in that extraordinary option redemption concept that we have with the bank loan. You can do that. You can pay for that as part of this. It's baked into this. That option's there. And also the bond issue would have a 5-year call provision exactly. So, I say exactly, let's call it, you know, June 1st, 2029 or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be your call provision. There would be no 101 or 102, you know, for the next, you know, 10 years. So you would have a more favorable call provision with the bond issue in this particular case. The downside, okay? We would have more administrative burden for the administration. It is by far, I will tell you that. We have to do the credit rating process. We'd have to, which we've worked through and handle that. Maybe it's something you'd be interested in, knowing what you are in Moody's Investor Services Standard Poor's. There's a value to that. You pay for it, but that's a part of the process. Second, there would be ongoing requirements associated with having bonds outstanding. The bank's going to want your financials every year. That's definitely true. They may ask a couple questions randomly, you know, as they're looking at things. But annually, for a bond issue, you'll have to file audits, demographic information, tax, tax information tied to how much you collect in taxes. There's certain things that the investors need to know annually. It's done once a year. It's not hard, but it is something annually you got to do. And there's some ongoing costs, about $1,000 a year you pay to administer the paying agent services. You put all that together, that's really the only main changes. You're going to make payments twice a year, just like you do with a bank loan. You just have more work to be done and an interest rate risk tied to that. So is that technically worth it to you for,
$5,000.
yeah, $5,000 a year?
Are we doing this work that has to be done in-house, or do we outsource that work to someone else?
Okay, so payments, you guys do in-house, right? You're gonna get invoices, you're getting payments. The ongoing continuing disclosure, that, what is the filings you make, you can hire a company that will send you reminders and then post the information on a website. There, if you wrote it on a, this has actually happened, if you hand wrote it on a napkin, they will scan in the handwritten napkin onto the website. It's ridiculous, but that's what they do. They don't rewrite the information you put in for purposes of their risk. So they will give you a template, they'll tell you, tell us our tax collector records and your top 10 taxpayers, and then they'll hit the button, push it up. That's $1,000 a year to do that. I think it can be done with staff. So those are the two things you have to do. So yes, you could-ish, but may not be worth it.
No one's gonna handle that.
Writing on a napkin?
A cocktail wrap.
She can do, this is why I'm missing, she can do one better, a lined piece of paper, right?
You're lost.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
lost.
So that's the 20-year option. We can talk through 15 real fast. It's a similar conversation, just a different payment. So again, for this purpose here, we have I'm gonna start with the yellow, about a $445,000-ish annual payment on the bank loan at that 3.9%, and then on the bond issue, it's about 440-ish. And it has, again, the same provision. Again, very similar concept for, you sitting at this table, you have a budget, right? So your question is, do you want your payments to be $440,000, or do you want your payments to be $360 before you pay down any principal, by the way, right? That $2.1 million will matter. So, I think we talked about that in previous meetings, how much that would reduce your payment, but we could provide you those details. But again, your budget for 25 would be, about 440 or 360-ish.
Could you explain the call feature under the bond?
Sure.
option?
Yeah, so the call features somewhat similar to how Webster works, except for that not that premium after. So what would happen is when you sell the bonds, the investors are buying them and they're saying, okay, we know that we're going to get paid back based on certain interest rates, based on the creditworthiness of the municipality. In up to 5 years, so 5 years from today, they know you have the option to refinance the debt if you want, for purposes of refinancing savings or any other reason. So if 90 days in advance of 5 years from today, we have an economic value of refinancing, we can sell bonds or use cash to put the money in an escrow and refinance the debt and get a new issuance. So they can call the bonds, and the investors would find out that their bonds are being called at that time. The 5-year call feature also matters that if after we pay off the 2.1-ish and you have an extra $500,000, you want to write another check, you would have to put the money in an escrow to the call date. So let's say 3 years from now, you have $500,000 and said, let's pay down principal because it makes economic sense for us to do that versus holding on our cash. You can write a check, tell the investors that the bonds are being called on that 5-year call date, put the money in an escrow that is invested in essentially U.S. Treasuries at the time, whatever those rates are at the time, and then we pick which maturities to pay off.
It's really from the call features from the bondholders' perspective. So the bondholders know for X period of time, typically in Pennsylvania it's 5 years, but it could in theory be longer, we are guaranteed our principal and interest payments for that period of time.
Jamie, your amortization tables are based on the original principal amount. If the borough goes ahead and pays down $2.1 million, what's the balance of the amortization look like?
We will get that back to you, but it would be essentially, $3 million-ish outstanding, which is also not. I mean, the payment would drop down. I mean, I can check my notes. I thought we ran it at one point in time, but we can tell you what it would look like.
I was just curious if, for example, with the 20-year bank loan, would it drop to $2 $200,000 a year? Or?
I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you're almost cutting it in half, so, it's probably 210, 220.
And typically, just since you bring it up, what is customary, and I think what we would offer, recommend, is once you get that money in that 2.1, typically most issuers kind of take it off the back end, so they prepay the back end of the loan. So once you prepay the 2.1 million, you're no longer left with a 20-year term, you're left with a 15-year term, as opposed to prepaying portions of each annual payment over the course of 20 years.
The loan
If that makes sense.
documents would specify how that
It
2.1
would.
one-time payment would be applied.
Yeah.
So that would be an issue of negotiation with the bank.
Yeah.
Now, have you, in your proposal, did you have any structuring for
We
how that?
leave it open because different banks do it different ways. I would say and more than likely, we want the flexibility sometimes if we, depending on the loan documents written, because it may be, maybe there's a value in doing, the first 2 years and then do the last 5. It's really semantics. More than likely, you're gonna pay off the end amount. That's just what's gonna happen.
You shorten the term,
Yeah.
but.
And also shorten and reduce the interest, because most interest you pay is, on the back, it accrues over
Similar to a
time.
mortgage.
I only say this because some issuers need more cash flow relief in the initial years, so some may decide to prepay the earlier years, because that's just better for them. I think you would rather have lower interest expense over the course of time.
All right,
that's
so
what-
your expectation would be that the estimated annual debt service probably remain the same, but we would.
No, the debt service would definitely change, go down.
We'll
Just
provide you
there'll
with
be
that.
less interest kicked up.
Yeah.
Your principal would stay
I'd
the
like to
same.
visualize that.
Your
yeah.
principal would stay the same as structured, but the interest would be less accrued. So you'd be paying interest on $3 million instead of $5 million, and that makes its way up.
We'll make the
But
assumption.
we're making principal payments on $5 million.
You're making principal payments on the structure of $5 million, but you're paying interest on $3 million.
Right.
You said you expect the RACP reimbursements, was it June of next year, or that's when?
I've been told February to April.
Only reason I ask is we can do the analysis assuming you get we'll assume for now 2.1 million. We can run the analysis here later today that shows, okay, well, this is the loan at issuance, this right here. And then come February 1 or February 15 of next year, you prepay 2.1 million. This is what your ending new payment structure looks like.
Yeah.
If that's,
I think that'd be beneficial.
Yeah, it's gonna be lower. I would also add, more than likely, kind of look odd, it will decline over the course of time. That's just the way bank and bond math works. So your lowest payment will be at the end, and that's just math.
yeah, it's decent. But we can certainly provide that to you.
Yeah, but to your point, it's probably $210,000 a year.
Okay.
And that kind of leads, I think.
So our budgeted number, you say 210,000 for next year, we do budget.
I would budget the full amount, honestly, just because it's no guarantee you're gonna get the RACP grant. We don't believe it will happen, but I'd rather you personally budget the higher number and then
Coming
be
better.
sad, be happy. But I know you have a budget you gotta deal with, so.
Yeah, we do.
But that kind of leads us into the next conversation, looking at these numbers. Do you all have any sort of appetite for the 15-year, the 20-year?
You will end up with a 15-year term more than likely once you pay down that debt. That's really what's gonna happen. And you're paying 0.20% for the value
Extra
of
5
locking
years.
in initially at 20 years. To save you, from the budgetary standpoint, what, 370, 360 starting point to,
70 grand a year, 80 grand a year.
that deviation will change a little bit to $2.1 million.
So it comes down to how much more debt would you like to incur while you're paying off whatever you decide to pay off. If you pay off.
It's how much more interest you want to pay for the value of having a longer term amortization once this is all done. But how much?
What premium would we
Right,
want to
and
pay?
having longer term
What premium would we
amortization.
want to pay?
Yeah, which is no different than all of us thinking
Use
about our home
structures.
mortgage, right? Do you wanna have a 30-year mortgage, or do you wanna have a 15-year mortgage, we're making those decisions? It's the same for you. You
For the
know,
cost of 0.2%.
0.2% you're paying,
Right.
It gives us a little more flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah,
You
You buy
you can always pay it off in time.
0.2% buys you an extra 5 years in term, which seems
Seems,
pretty good from our perspective.
makes sense.
it's normally
it's
not
more-
that close.
And it's more helpful to your budget, the longer financing term.
But it also gives us the opportunity to spend more money. And if we did wanna spend more money, go with the lawyer.
I
Yeah.
agree.
You mean if you were gonna come back next year and borrow more, there's just,
Well, if you're trying to be
More.
fiscally responsible and not overburden the community with debt, because if it's 15 or 20, my father would say, pay it off in 15, not 20.
So, that's right.
right, cause you save in the overall interest expense over the life. But it,
And
yes,
it might stretch us a bit that we can't buy something else, but everybody wants to buy more. This is a
yeah, to your point, it's,
governor on our
The-
problem.
it's the budgetary annual, I should say, budgetary affordability question versus the, yeah, I might pay more or less over the 15 or 20 years. So it's one of
The
those,
present value math isn't that big a difference, because depending on the yield you're assuming, because if you think about it, if you're holding onto your money for a longer, your payment, you're paying less, you're holding on to that $60,000, but you're earning more than your yield. There's more value to that as well. So you can make arguments both ways. I'm again agnostic to what you guys want to do. You're the ones going to be making, or you and your taxpayers are going to be making the payments. It's a philosophical question. So let's just talk about the timeline real fast. We can go back to this if you'd like, as you guys kind of stew on it for a little bit. So the next page is page 6. So this has been our kind of dual track timeline that we've been shooting for, and we are on target at this point in time. Because we received the proposals yesterday, honestly, happy we're having this conversation, because you have choices here. So we should definitely decide bonds, bank, that's point number 1. Depending on which decision we go with, we have kind of 2 paths. They all lead to making some kind of decisions or authorizations at a couple of council meetings. So at your next council meeting, the suggestion will be that you would be asked to authorize the advertisement of a debt ordinance, okay? The debt ordinance would be prepared by legal counsel. The type of ordinance that we create is all tied to if we do a bank loan versus a bond issue. And the only difference between those two are, if we do the bank loan, we know exactly which bank we're going with. We'll have to decide which term, of course, and we would know the amount. With the bond issue, we would do something called a parameters ordinance, which we would essentially authorize the future selling of bonds at a higher borrowing amount, higher interest rate, final maturity, but it gives us the flexibility to go through the process, because we'll price bonds later on. It doesn't, cost you any money any different. It's just 2 different versions of the authorization to move forward. That decision would have to be made essentially by the next meeting, ultimately, what we're gonna do. If we decide to go with the bond issue, we are 95% ready to send a bunch of more information to staff to update, get us ready for the offering statement, and get us to go to the rating process, which you can see on the left-hand side would happen, over the next month-ish. We're, pretty close. If all goes, we get those authorizations at the November meeting, we'd more than likely lock in rates, sometime in November around the election. Okay? And if all those things happen, we'd settle before the end of the year, as we said from the beginning. If we do the bank loan, whatever one that is, we would authorize next week and say advertise, come back at the board meeting, authorize adopt the ordinance, and submit the DCD, and we would be done. No more work. We have to wait for the state to approve it, and you get the money by mid-December. Easy peasy is the answer.
Must we settle by December?
There's two reasons to settle by December, and they're both good for you. One is you have used your bank qualification for tax purposes this calendar year. We talked about that concept that if we did another financing next year, we have a $10 million window of what we're allowed to do bank qualified, and it resets on December 31st. So that's very good flexibility, point number one. Two, it gives staff the final number to close up the books on the accounting side, tied to the fire truck, tied to having money in the account so they can start investing immediately, and gets us the process moving forward on the RACP grant. So there's no reason, in my humble opinion, to wait until 2025, because you lose flexibility, and you got a pretty good rate here.
Even though anticipated rates are gonna be coming down, anticipated, but not guaranteed.
Yep. You know, you guys probably all noticed this, paying attention to the Wall Street Journal. When the Fed dropped the interest rates by 50 basis points,
Yeah.
Treasury rates went up, bond rates essentially stayed the same. Now, we talked about that at these previous meetings. They've been planning for this, the bond market's been planning this for a while now,
Right.
so we knew that. You know, it's already baked in. So I was, you know, hoping we'd see a little different on some of the banks on the bank's loan side, but banks are smart too. But, you know, from our perspective, it already got built in. So I hope the Fed drops interest rates and I'm refinancing a whole bunch of bonds over the next year, how much we're gonna see in interest rate dropping.
Yeah, it's a guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't play that game. Certainly it's worth it too.
Well, what's everybody's thoughts on the bank versus the loan? I'll be honest with you, I'm just in favor of the bank side of everything.
I do.
It's less administrative with the bank deal, bonds are a pain.
They're not as fun.
Yeah.
Right. But,
Well,
lower interest, you
It's
know,
not the greatest time of year to get, add a lot of work to fill.
lot of work for bonds.
Recognizing that.
We try to make it easy. I mean, I think that's always how what we do, but there is time and effort to get done.
So, I'm just sort of, I saw heads and nod about the bank. If we're doing the bank, then the next question is, and I know we can take this council anyway, but do we do the 15 or 20 year?
I'd say 15.
Okay, my only thought on 20, and I don't really care, to be honest with you, but if we do 20, I was gonna say we take the difference between the 15 and the 20, we bank it, we put it in the pligget. Now, eventually, those interest rates may end up being below what,
They were 1 basis point not too long ago.
right? I mean, that's always the possibility, but if we do that and we budget 15-year amortization into the 20, in 15 years, we have the money plus the interest that we've gained on it to pay it off.
Yeah, I mean, why not, you know, then we're just playing, you know, with our own, why not go to 20 and have that flexibility?
The old Dutchie in me.
I can hear my father over here. I get it.
It's a building. I'm gonna give, it's a building. It's gonna be around for a long time. You can justify the longer term, but you guys are right. I'm not going one way or the other.
So you don't have a recommendation?
The rate is 20 basis, you're paying 20 basis points to have flexibility.
Right.
You can be fiscally conservative, and you can also be managing your funds internally. If you guys have that strategy, go for it. New Hanover Township down in Gilbertsville borrowed money for 15 years to do their municipal building complex, and every year the township manager sends us an email and says, please rerun our amortization based on this amortization so I can budget the shorter one each year, even though we did a longer term amortization. And his rate is 1%, by the way, and he's doing that. I love him.
That's really interesting.
But yes, that's what we do. So we can do that for you. It's just it's how you guys want to handle it. Yeah, I make recommendations all the time. I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. You can manage it both ways.
More conservative to go 15.
It's more conservative to go 15 because you're paying more and
Paying less over the life and interest.
Hey, right. And it puts a governor on us too, we don't want to spend going forward.
today 4% is lower than what you're earning. A year from now,
Who knows?
4% may be higher than what you're earning.
So right now we're getting 5 or around 5.
We're 5.25 now.
We're
Right.
dropping.
It's dropping.
It's dropping.
Yeah, Pligett's rates are tied to 10-year US treasury rates. So as the treasury rates move around a little bit, things mature and they redo, so. It's a good problem, guys.
I'm gonna stay with my 20.
I'll go with Steve, whatever he says. Or his father says.
Oh, what my father says what I'm about to say are two different things. I just think we should do the 20 and then take the difference in what we're paying. The reserve account, and just keep dumping money into that. Well, we did it, we've done it successfully, we haven't taken money out of any reserve accounts yet for anything other than what's been reserved for. I believe that is a fair statement. Is that a fair statement?
The reserves that we've established are really just labels of fund balance.
I understand.
There are
I
not
understand.
separate.
But we've
cash
never
accounts.
used the money that we've labeled under those balances for
Correct.
Something else.
something else. We never took the fire department's money and
Use it for
pay off
operations.
operations, right? I don't really care. I understand that 15 years, okay, we know what we're doing, it's a budget number, we'll deal with it. It's one less headache, it's not a reserve account, it's all that kind of good stuff. 20 years. The 20 years gives you a little bit more flexibility.
And for 20 basis points, which.
Yeah, if it was a half a point or,
Right, 20 basis point is a.
it's $5,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
20 basis points roughly, something
And
like that.
have that flexibility.
Yeah, you're benefiting from the yield curve, to be honest with you. That's
Yeah.
really what's gonna happen.
And who knows what's gonna happen? I mean, everything's a crapshoot right now.
All right.
I'll make a motion.
First of all, we're talking about the bank, so I think we need to make a motion. Do we need to make a motion to do the bank and then make a motion to do the years, or do we just make a motion to do the bank and the years?
I think you can do both as well.
You can do one motion.
I'll make a motion, that we, use Webster's Bank at a 20-year rate.
Do we have a second? No one wants a second.
I'll second
I can't do anything. All right, we have a motion and a second to advance this to the full council. That's all we're doing right now, right? We're just the asset council. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
it.
Aye.
Any opposed? I have to abstain.
And in the interim, we will get you a list of Webster Bank loans that we've worked with in the past several
We probably
years.
should set it based on that, but
And then we can
Your
also,
recommendation.
You gotta feel comfortable with us.
your recommendation, sure.
and then we'll also send you what the 20-year structure would look like once you repay 2.1
Yeah,
billion.
that would like to see, because that's the number we got a budget for.
Right.
Can I throw, I know you just made a motion, I apologize. I can make one comment if you'd like. We can also structure the principal in the first year to be less if you think you need some room in your budget for structuring purposes.
Listen, we're borrowing money for the first, this place doesn't borrow money
Yeah.
because for some reasons that I would argue are wrong, but, no, I think we buy our debt.
You pay it,
We buy debt.
that's
We buy
fine, I
our
just
debt,
wanted
we
to throw it
pay our
out there,
debt.
you have flexibility if you wanted, so.
No, I don't.
It is
No,
a
we buy our debt, we pay our
monthly
debt.
payment.
It's semi-annual, semi-annual.
Semi-annual.
So you'll pay
Is there any
interest
chance-
semi-annually and principal once a year.
Yep. Twice a year. So,
Interest,
Interest
Twice.
twice a
interest
year.
twice, principal once.
Principal once.
principal at the end of the year.
We can structure that. I think we
Or-
have structured as 12/6/1, 12/1
I
maybe.
believe so, yeah, I'll send you the amortization. Yeah, we definitely do it after you receive your taxes.
Is there any chance of that interest rate dropping till we finalize that pretty much set?
No, we're locked.
We're locked in.
It works both ways. We don't want the bank coming back to us and saying, well, rates went up, we're gonna increase your rate. If rates go down, we're not coming back to that.
Okay.
So Dave, to be clear, my dad on this shoulder was telling me that when he bought his first house, the interest rates were 12%.
So mine was 9%. But-
Mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my mom's was 15, and she qualified for low income.
Gentlemen, good work.
Thank you, yeah, this has been
Yeah,
great,
thank you.
good news, easier for everybody. We'll be in touch with more information.
Send some goodies.
The numbers we're showing you here are pretty close to final, we're gonna revise them, get you some things, so you'll see more details. My important point, I have 3 meetings next week. You're gonna see Garrett if you want him on the 8th, to kind of have a similar, not a full detail, it's up to you guys how you wanna handle it.
Go back for the council meeting.
Yeah. I will definitely be coming to the November meeting for the ordinance, but I can't make next week's meeting.
We're gonna be available if you want.
I think it's not a bad idea.
Okay, that's fine.
So
That's
that's
it.
it.
Listen, Mike, it's
Lancaster, Wyomissing, and that far. Better than driving to Pittsburgh.
Ooh,
I was expecting to see, something from Montgomery staff, since
they're an underwriter, so, yeah, they don't do bank loans. Yeah, they don't do bank loans, they're bond underwriters. So we haven't had that conversation, we wouldn't, there would have been some underwriters we would have talked about if we'd gone down that road. We would have to have that conversation.
I was just basing it on what Carol had told me.
Jamie does a very good business, a competitive sales in
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania.
We did a deal with them yesterday for Westchester area school district.
Oh, really?
AAA and they kick butt. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you all for your time.
Good job.
Nice job.
Steve, we still need to table the second motion
I thought we did.
Nah.
Second motion was what?
to hire bond counsel if we were gonna go with the bond.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's an important point, so Chris, you guys gonna handle it?
Yeah, we'll handle it.
So.
Because we're not going with the
Bond
bond,
versus loan, review, discuss the options for council, blah, 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 but.
because we're not doing that, we have
So
to
why
table
Not
it.
applicable.
We have to make motions, it's on the, so let's make a motion that
Because
we
we're not going with the bond.
don't.
We're not.
Oh, you mean,
Oh,
Oh,
we
yes,
denied
you're right.
instead of table
yes,
it.
you're correct.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion, I can't make a motion, sorry, someone's gotta make the motion
To what?
to
Deny.
deny.
yeah.
So then,
Second.
Motion is second to deny hiring bond counsel, since we're not
Right.
going to bonds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I abstain. I'm not sure if I had to abstain from that one or not.
Yeah, it's good
Sorry.
practice.
When in doubt.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you all
everybody.
for your time.
Thank you.
See you next week.
All right, that was fun. Actually, it was pretty good news.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cash update on speed dial, on speed
On
speaker.
speed dial, all right. Cash investments at the end of September totaled $10,342,000. A small increase since the end of August. Interest rates from Tompkins are not yet available, we're too early in the month. But if Plea gets any indication, they are dropping. At this time, there are 2 large grant reimbursements pending. One, the local share account is for the Stonehouse at an amount of $210,000, and the other is for the work with the bridge, which will be a little over $300,000.
And we're expecting them by the end of the year.
We are, yes.
Okay.
When we look at our Pliget investments, one additional term of $1 million will be maturing on Monday. That is the last of the 5%. The Pliget class is now at 1.1. Pliget Prime
Is that
remains
what?
at 6.8. Excuse me?
Big class is at 4.7. You said 1.1. I think you're looking at the,
It
I'm
sounded
looking at
like-
the dollar amount.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking percent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There
$1,100,000
you go.
in the class account. 6.8 million in the prime account is still just over 5%. Liquid fuels is also in the class account. So for a total of $9,228,000. For the term that is maturing on Monday, this is where you can see the rates dropping. Over the next 12-month period, there are no rates available over 5%. Still above 4% at the end of a year from now is the projection. So we need a motion as to
Do we need this money? anytime soon?
action. Pardon?
Or you feel like we need this money well, we have access to other dollars anyway.
Yeah. If it stays in class, it stays liquid. I only keep in there what I need for operations for the month, because I can make 2 withdrawals from the prime account each month.
Okay, so our questions are to put it either just in the class or the prime.
Well, I can move it to prime.
Whatever you
We
want
need to determine what to do with the term that's maturing on Monday. You can roll it into class and I can move it into prime if it's not needed.
The rate's highest in prime range, if you're looking.
Pardon?
Prime has the highest rate.
For
Yes.
now, but if that drops, do you also wanna reinvest it into 60, 90, 120?
Yeah, we could take money from prime and we could try to hedge some future rate decreases, but we just don't know where the rates are going.
So the class accounts for 7.9. If we decided to do it for 6 months or a year, the year would be 4%.